Hey folks, and welcome to the Deconstructor of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Mishka Katkov, and we have a banger episode for you. Paul Gouge is factually one of the best founders in the industry. He has built 3 companies over the past 2 decades, a little bit more than 2 decades, and these companies have not only made amazing games, but they've also been acquired 4 times, with Playdemic, his latest company, being bought first by Warner Brothers and then by EA for $1.4 billion. Now, in this episode, Paul talks about his 4th company, 4th Star, and how that is going to be the culmination of all the learnings he and his co-founder have gained over the past 2.5 decades. And I think this episode was really fun. One of the most fun ones that I have recorded. At least we did it on site, so that might affect it. It was extremely insightful. I feel like Paul is the type of a leader that people would crawl through broken glass to. And in this episode, we talk about why on earth him and Alex Rugby, his co-founder, are building 4th Star after such a successful career where they can essentially retire and do other stuff. We talk about what they've learned from the previous companies that they will be doing in this one, what they've done in previous companies that they definitely want to avoid. We talk about the 4th Star's 4-day work week. That's going to be an interesting conversation. And also what makes Paul believe that they can succeed in the market of tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast episode. Sound quality wasn't the best one. Don't worry, I've bought new microphones for these on-site interviews, so they will be happening as I'm traveling a little bit more. And Istanbul, 7th of March, so just in a couple of weeks. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you on the 8th of March at the Istanbul Investor Summit with founders and investors. And we also have, I think, 5 upcoming GDC events. You can find them all and find the ones you want to be at on the Deconstructor of Fun newsletter. So if you haven't signed up, please do. All the links will be there. You'll be able to join us in various events around the world because we love hanging out with you. So anyways, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Gouge. Paul Gouge, co-founder of 4th Star. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
In beautiful London town.
Absolutely. In this amazing apartment that you've hired specially just for us, which people won't be able to see. There's actually a bed in the corner,
yes.
which we're not talking about.
We're not talking about it. We don't see the bed.
No, you won't see the bed in the final edit.
Also the green around here.
It is. It's kind of, other things can happen here other than podcasts.
So we are on Brick Lane and other things definitely happen. I would call this a trap house
Yes.
if we're in the US, but
we're going for Peggy Sevier.
But the podcast is moving to the next level, clearly.
Indeed.
So it's from the Zoom to trap houses now. so Paul, I want to talk a little bit about your background before we jump in. So you recently raised $10 million from Griffin Gaming Partners.
We did.
That's a good thing. You're a startup founder, all that jazz. But I think the previous episode is even more interesting. So 4th Star. Before 4th Star, you were the CEO and co-founder of Playdemic. That's known for Golf Clash, and Golf Clash is known for being sold, well, not Golf Clash, the whole company was sold for $1.4 billion to EA, and before that it was sold to Warner Brothers.
Indeed.
So double exit.
Double exit, yeah.
And before that double exit, there were 2 other exits. Rockpole Games was sold to Eidos and Square Enix in 2007.
Correct.
And Battlemail in 2001.
Correct.
What are we doing? I don't know where to start. You are a superstar founder.
Well, we've certainly been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
Whether we're superstars or not, I guess there's for other people to judge. But we've been doing this for, makes me feel very old. Like, this is my 24th year in video games. So, and we've had a great journey. I mean, each of those businesses has been different to the prior one. So, Battlemail was very much a early play in online gaming. It was widely distributed. It was actually a play by email product. So
horrible.
it was really, it
Sounds like work. Sounds like work.
Do you know what? It was work. It was very different, and it was. And we had 1 million players in that game.
Wow.
Yeah, in 2000, which was like no one had 1 million players in 2000.
Nobody had a million email addresses.
Exactly. Yeah, it was incredible, but it was a great experience. We learned so much, and actually, bizarrely, that game was self-published, so we distributed that game ourselves, which we then didn't do again for like another 10 years or so until we got back to Playdemic. So it was interesting sort of seeing history repeat itself there. But I guess over that journey, I'd like to think that each of those companies has been better than the one before.
Yeah.
You know, we've been better at understanding what makes them tick, how we want to organize them, what the culture is. We've certainly made a lot of mistakes.
Of course.
So we've kind of tried to iterate on those things each time. And Playdemic was definitely the best version of us.
Till date.
To date, yeah, and hopefully Full Star's an even better version of us.
And I'm so before I start asking in about the details, like what's good, what's bad, and what you've learned, because those are super interesting. I'm curious to understand your. This sounds so horrible. Your why. Oh, that's disgusting. I don't want to be.
Simon Sinek.
No. Let's delete that part. But I want to understand this. You are very successful. You have everything you need. Probably great family, I would assume. You're a nice guy. You got money. You've shipped games that millions and millions of players have been playing over 2 decades. You and your co-founder Alex Rigby have been setting up all those four companies for now. So I'm just trying to understand, why are you doing this again? Because it's not easy. I like Playdemic. So it was founded in 2007?
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
And it sold in 2020.
2021.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's not like
It's not overnight.
no.
No.
There's a lot of painful things. I remember playing Gang
Nations.
I
Thank
remember
you,
playing
thank
that.
you, Miss Guest. You're one of 8 people that played it.
Well, I didn't say it. When I was playing, I was like, why would somebody do Clash of Clans with gangs? Like, who thought this is a good idea?
Oh yeah,
That's why I remember.
We'll come back to that. That was one of our mistakes. Yeah.
So why are you doing this again with Alex? Like you.
Well, this
Is
is.
there
I mean,
nothing else?
you love MMA. This is our MMA. You know, this is we like the
I
punishment.
don't do MMA. I watch MMA. It's like,
It's our jiu-jitsu.
yeah.
No, I think I think in all honesty, I genuinely love it. You know, and I think we went on this journey which has evolved over those 23, 24 years. And when we sold the business to EA, I genuinely thought this might be it. You know, we left the business, and I think I took a year off. My wife might not wholly agree, but I'm pretty sure I took a year off, and Alex did the same. And our CTO left, our CEO left, and we sort of all exited the business. And I spent some time just thinking about what it was I wanted to do. I love spending more time with my family, which is great. I love doing some things I hadn't done before, indulging some spare time. But ultimately, I kind of reached the conclusion that I'd like to think I'm still young enough to really do something interesting, constructively with business. Video games is all I know.
Yeah.
I'm still really excited about mobile gaming, despite the current narrative.
Oof, we'll talk about that.
Well, I'm sure we will. I can always feel Eric Kress like slating me as we talk. But genuinely felt this is something we really want to do again. We've learned a lot, as you say, over the years. We made lots of mistakes. We really feel like we've got that passion still in us. We love making products. We love making video games. We love the people, the industry, the possibility. And I couldn't really think of anything more exciting to do. Yeah. So maybe that's the poverty of my own imagination.
No, but
that's really.
But that's a powerful message. You do what you love to do.
We do.
And there's nothing to it. And it's not that's not the money. That's not the fame. That's not the. Well, I don't know about fame. There's no fame in this business.
No, I'm definitely not famous.
but
you might be quite famous, actually.
Well, I don't know. Like with 2,000 people, maybe. Like, and that's not worth it. But like, there's no other motivation than you're doing it because you love to do it.
Yeah, it's definitely not about the money. And for me, and I know a lot of people say this: who've made money. It's easy to say you've made money, but it never was about the money. Yeah. So my first career was in investment banking. If I was interested in money, I should have stayed there. Yes. And that was just, I hated it. It just wasn't for me. So for me, the journey of building these companies and building these games, and I see those two things sort of in parallel. The idea of building a company and the culture and the mission and the vision alongside building video games. I see those two things having lots of parallels, and I love both of those bits. And that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning.
That's beautiful. Are all 4 companies based out of Manchester, or were they based out?
Yeah, they pretty much have been. We had a London office for a while with Rockpool. We had a licensing business as part of Rockpool that was called Ironstone, that was based out of London. I lived in London for a long time. But fundamentally, yeah, Manchester, we've always had this pull back to Manchester. I mean, you and I both went to Manchester University.
One semester was enough.
But yeah, do you know what was funny is when we were growing Rockpool, we were trying to expand. Yeah. So Rockpool did a lot of work for higher development. Yeah. And we found it so much easier to hire the kind of talent we needed in Manchester than we did in London. Yeah. And so I moved from London personally to Manchester for that reason, because that we were scaling better in Manchester than we were in London. So I used to commute from London to Manchester. Yeah. And then it became a day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, all week. And it was like, no, we need to move.
And were you United fan before that or after?
I was, for my sins. No one's going to listen now, but I have been a United fan from childhood. So,
okay, yeah. Interesting. Even living out of London?
Yeah, I mean, most, as any cynical football fan will tell you, most United fans live in London.
Yeah, wow. All right, interesting. All right, so let's jump into the learnings, because this is what I'm really interested in. Is like, over these 3 previous companies, what were the kind of like the key learnings? I think it's very hard to speak of 24 years.
Yes.
But there must have been certain things where you did your first company, and it's like, okay, we can do it again, we have a new idea, and you do that, and then you do the third one, so there must have been left certain things that you were continuously doing, like continue to do these things.
Yes, yeah, and I think there's probably macro things and micro things.
Yes.
And so when I say macro things, I mean those big ideas that you really got to hold on to. And then the micro things are probably more procedural, methodologies, ways of doing things that are smaller, more detailed. So in terms of the macro stuff, one thing, and some of these things, some of the macro sounds quite trite, but I think it's really important to recognize the reality of them. So the one thing that I would say up front is that it's all about the people. I know a lot of people say that, and I think what's interesting is I've said that for most of my career. I think I only really started living that with Playdemic. So a lot of people you meet in this industry will say it's all about the people. People are a great asset, you need incredible talent. Absolutely evidently true. I'm not convinced that's always lived. And certainly when I was running the Rockpool business, we were just trying to hire people. We had a lot of work on, we worked for our business, we were trying to hire people. I mean, there was a moment in time where if you lived in Manchester and you made video games, I probably would have hired you. So I think there is an understanding over that journey that those things that do sound a bit trite are 100% true. It's all about super talented people, and a collection of super talented people with experience and knowledge are significantly more productive, innovative, creative than a less talented group of a larger number of people. So I think that's a really, really important point. I think secondly, and again, this is one of those sort of big ideas, but I think you have to live it, is a culture. You have to create an environment where those super talented people are going to do great work. And that's really tough. It's very hard to do that in a world where I often joke that video games is an art form masquerading as a business. Yeah. So we try and sort of make video games look like a business. We put deadlines on things and budgets on things, and we try and make them to conform to traditional manufacturing processes, when actually it's an art form. And I think trying to create an environment, a culture, where people feel safe to take risks, where people feel empowered, where people communicate effectively, where there's transparency, trying to build a platform that great, super talented people with experience can then do great things is really important. And we spend a lot of time at Playdemic. It's one of my sort of big missions at Playdemic to create that, foster that environment.
I mean, how do you do that? Like, so in my experience, I've more often failed than succeeded. Like there were studios where the environment was the one that I loved. Yes. I think the retention is like, with like when people don't leave and you're having fun and very like-minded, or a type of place where it's tough for new people even to come in because the existing ones have gelled so well. Yeah, it's usually that's the kind of negative part of like well-gelled teams.
I think that's right, and I think one of the things that I would say about that particular topic is that you remember the famous Netflix sort of the deck that we all consumed back in 2009. There was a line from those Netflix values that really chimed with me, which was, we are a sports team, we're not a family. And I think that's really important, is that there's this idea that people will talk a lot about, that companies are families. They're not families. Companies are pro sports teams. Elite companies are like elite athletes. You have to operate at the top of your game. You can't tolerate poor performance. That doesn't mean you don't support each other. It doesn't mean you don't work together. But what it does mean is you don't just forgive. You don't just kind of say, oh, well, I know this guy hasn't done this thing, but he's really nice. We get on with him really well. We go way back. That's not what that kind of collegiate culture is about. It's about high performance, and high performance is about supporting, feeling safe, being one unit where everyone in that unit is playing in the position they should be in. But it doesn't mean sort of unconditional love.
How do you combine that approach, which is that now that you talked about it, and I was kind of like reflecting things that worked, reflecting things that didn't work. Absolutely agree. And I was thinking about things that worked. Like, was it like a sports team? I was like, no, it was kind of like a locker room.
Yeah.
Which is like, I was under 30 then, and we had a lot of fun, and we were like,
it's a natural thing.
And we were an extremely well gelled machine.
Yes.
I understand not, probably the easiest place for new people to come in, but yeah. Anyways, moving to the next one. Moving away from that. But I wanted to ask about the sports team, not a family approach. It's a cutthroat approach in many ways because sports teams are very brutal to players and managers, especially.
Do you know what? I think they're both. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about football,
yeah.
Managers getting fired. But I think there's something about that kind of elite performance that requires both things simultaneously. Yes, you do have to be brutal. You do have to be brutal in your honesty about what you're trying to do. You have to be brutal, and we're going to talk about how competitive our industry is. You have to be brutal in your understanding of how competitive that industry is. But also, the best teams are the ones that truly support each other. What I love is when you see, as you say, I'm a Man United fan.
Yeah.
We signed this player called Højlund, who's our new striker, and we spent £60 million on him. And he scored his first goal only a few weeks ago. Now, he'd been with us from the start of the season, and he was the big white hope. But what I loved was when he scored that goal, all the other players were around him celebrating. They were celebrating with him because they knew he needed that goal.
Yeah.
They knew he needed to have that win, and they were really supportive of him. And I think there is a double-edged sword to this kind of nature of elite sports teams and elite companies, is they are highly supportive of each other.
Yeah.
But they're supportive in the pursuit of success rather than just being supportive for the sake of being supportive. And I think that probably brings me on to another point, which is about absolute clarity in what it is you're trying to do. I think if everyone understands what they're signing up for, they understand the mission, they understand the vision, they understand how competitive the market is, they understand what they're signing up for, and they're going to give it their all. That's all really asking of anybody. So it's not brutal in the sense of being overly aggressive to people, setting targets that can't be met, not providing the right tools and tech and support to deliver on something. It's about ensuring that all those things are in place, but all acknowledging how difficult it is, and we've got to be on our A game to get there.
Yeah, so I wrote here, like, the question that I have here is around, like, all of these are very easy to agree upon. Like, there's nothing. But then when the rubber hits the road, that's the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
And part of it, you said psychological safety. We all know that when you have psychological safety, you're more likely to succeed and so forth. It's just like playing with a good team. If you know that they're going to support you, they're going to celebrate with you, you scoring is for the team, not for you. So like all of that.
Yeah.
But when you put the sort of a safety versus support, those are kind of like two different things, if you know what I mean. It's like on one hand, or safety and performance, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Where on the one hand, it's like, I have to be safe, I have to try me, I have to, feel that I'm not endangered in my position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, if you don't perform, you're out.
Yeah. And I think, and you're right, I think one way of sort of differentiating between those two things is the notion of persistent underperformance.
Yeah.
I think part of support is recognizing that failure will come through experimentation, innovation, and that type of failure is acceptable. If that's part of the mission, if we are aiming to deliver something exceptional and we know we're taking creative or production or technology risks, then failure is an inevitable part of that consequence. I think that kind of failure is not only forgivable, but actually part of the process. I think where, to your point, where some over support might be the enemy of performance, which I think is your point, is where you allow underperformance to persist.
Yeah.
Where a member of the team isn't performing for a long period of time and it's recognized and nothing is done about it.
Yeah.
I think that's something I've seen in organizations, and I've definitely been guilty of this. I've definitely been guilty of sucking those bullets and having people in an organization which frankly everybody sort of knows that this individual isn't performing, but no one really wants to face up to it. No one wants to do anything about it because everyone's been nice to each other. And I think that's the challenge. That's where safety is is no longer safe, because what you're doing is endangering the organization, you're endangering the culture, you're endangering the mission, you're endangering the success of the others around you, and that's where the right thing to do is to actually act in that situation. I remember someone saying to me, that who I really respect, that one poor performer in 100 does more than 1% damage, and I love that, and I think that's a really important way to think about it.
Yeah, and then one top performer does most
1% contribution.
80% of the contribution.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
That's and this is like again, we're on a theoretical level, and I understand everything perfectly, and I think everybody agrees on that. But having been in different organizations, I've been in quite a few, and I have been at these organizations that are, based on Netflix.
Yes.
Like Supercell is a good example.
Yeah.
Supercell of 2013, 12. That's a straight up Netflix organization, and it is. When people talk about psychological safety, in theory, I understand that 100%. And then I remember this organization that was on top of its game, best of the best people, and the turnover, I know at some point it was like 50% of new employees who start. And that's not psychologically safe. It doesn't sound like it, but nevertheless, the organization is incredibly well performing.
Yes.
So it's kind of like almost like the gauntlet for people who get to be part of this organization as they join.
And I think I understand that. I think you're right. I think that the Supercell model is one we all hold up, and there's incredible success that came out of particularly that period. And obviously, Ilka's talked a lot about sort of the DNA of that. I think from my perspective, psychological safety is one of the hardest things that I've found to create, because it goes against a lot of natural human instincts, particularly in creative pursuits. We all naturally attempt to defend our ideas. We have a natural association with things that we've thought of or things that we've created. The idea that someone else would challenge those requires a level of maturity and insight and perspective to be able to take a step back and say, actually, Miska is challenging this thing that I'm emotionally attached to, but I need to take a step back and understand that actually the reason he's doing that is that the pursuit of the ultimate goal is the right thing for all of us. And I think that's a really difficult thing to create in an organization. I think in terms of the turnover of headcount, I think part of that could be that, could result in some people not being psychologically safe. I think one thing I would say, and be interested in what Ilka would say about this, but that environment is not for everybody. And some people go into it and realize, I don't want to be in this environment. This doesn't suit me. And I think, those who are left or not left, those who continue in that organization might actually be grateful. And I've had this experience that other people are no longer in that organization. And that for them creates a level of safety.
Exactly. And we're talking about Supercell 10 years ago, so that's not of today. But I remember another point that was raised. I don't know if this is from Netflix or was this from Riot, actually. In their culture was that a good enough performance gets you, was it like a
generous severance package?
I think that's Netflix, but I remember visiting Riot in those same days, and that was, the CEO told us this, and I remember it resonated because there, I was like, that's a good one. And nope.
And it kind of is, and I think what it talks to is that demand for excellence. When you think about our industry, how the proceeds of success are not evenly distributed.
But it goes back to, it's all about the people, and kind of like what I've been mulling around this a lot, because I've made all the possible mistakes here, and I've kind of going, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of thinking about successes and the failures, and it feels like the team building is the most important part, because psychological safety, making everybody happy, all those things are great, but they're not meant for everybody, and you have to build the type of team that can execute and that you can lead, because there are different leaders and there are different people, and some people fail. In some football teams, you go from Manchester United to Real Madrid and you're dog shit.
Absolutely.
And the other way around as well. But nevertheless, when they played in their own teams, they were the best players. And so it goes back to building the type of team that you can lead and being brutal, not brutal, but I don't know what's the right word.
Well, I think, the way I would put that is, and I totally agree with you, is chemistry. There needs to be chemistry amongst the team. You need to have a highly performant group of individuals that are not just capable of acting individually, but when they come together, their skill set is amplified. And I think that comes from chemistry. You know, if you think about it as a recipe, you know, garlic is amazing, ice cream is amazing. I don't want ice cream garlic, you know.
There's some of that.
Well, there might be that. Garlic ice cream might be a success, but you know what I'm saying. You know, the things that you know that just don't go together. So I think that chemistry is also really important. You know, that you can't put people together that just because they're highly talented.
Yes.
You need to understand that how they're going to operate together in that culture and that team.
Fascinating. So, all about people, create an environment, sports team, not a family. What else? What other?
Well, I think, and you know, I think I touched on it a bit earlier, but in terms of those big macro things, I think you have to be really, really clear on the mission and the vision. You know, and the mission and vision, again, are these words that get thrown around and they're sort of very corporate jargonistic. But I think, you know, the way I see mission and vision is just a really clear statement as to what it is we're trying to do. You know, my mission statement is, why do I exist?
Yeah.
Why are we coming here? You know,
my God, Simon Sinek.
Yeah, well it is. You know, it's back to Simon Sinek again. But I think ultimately, I think that's so important. And I think a lot of these, because I think we've all consumed way too many business books over the years, we build up this natural cynicism towards some of these things. But there's real important kernels in these things, you know, and I think from my perspective, having a very clear mission and vision is really like having a map. If you go on an adventure, you and I want to know where we're going. We've got a very clear understanding of why we exist and how.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
So I was helping this.
It's a psychologically safe space.
Yeah, it's psychologically. I cordially disagree on this one. So I'll give an example. I was helping a team. I don't know, startup, 150 people. I guess that's a startup.
Big startup.
Big startup. Anyway, they've been out for a while. It's an app. They've been doing, you know, good, and they have a very strong vision.
Yeah.
And they were leading the team through goals. And so what was happening in between those two is that is that you have your vision, and that's clear. Everybody is on board, and they lacked product strategy. They didn't. So they lacked company strategy. They lacked product strategy. At that point, they already had two big products, or one big and one new, and they lacked roadmap that is based on the product strategy. And so instead it went down to the goals like, hey, you need to hit this, you need to do that. So we need our retention up, our monetization is a little bit lacking, let's focus on that on the next quarter. And it created an environment where everything was like up in the air all the time.
Sure.
Because there was that. So where I helped, apparently, so I helped them, and then in the end it actually worked.
Yeah.
Was I helped them to build a product strategy. Just, you know, sit everybody down. It took a long time because you have to get onboarded and blah, blah. And then that product strategy led to the product managers making their own roadmaps that they presented to the leadership team. And now suddenly it went from this goal, that goal, retention, monetization, social, user acquisition. Now we need to boost our this number and that number to, we know what we're going to do for the next 2 years. We're going to know what, this is the roadmap for the 6 months. There's enough room. And then people felt empowered and they're leading. And nothing really, like in my opinion, nothing really changed that much. We made some personal changes, but not much. But nevertheless, when they worked on the strategy together, that was very concrete, on the product strategy, and then built their own roadmaps, people felt that this is a stable organization, and they were much happier working there.
I wholeheartedly agree with that approach, and I think that's something that really resonates with what we do. So when we talked before about the macro and the micro, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make, you know, despite me saying mission and vision are really important, I absolutely believe they are. In isolation, they can become meaningless. So an analogy I often use with my teams and other companies that I've advised is, let's say we decide that, you know, you're a fit guy, we're going to see if Misko can run the 100 meters under 11 seconds.
Never gonna
happen.
happen.
So if we just say, look, we're going to start this incredible mission, Misko and I, so we've got a mission, we've got a vision, and the vision is Misko's going to run the 100 meters under 11 seconds. Project Icarus. You know, let's do it, let's go. That's kind of meaningless. You know, this kind of ridiculous goal is meaningless.
Yes.
However many times I've stood up at a town hall and bang on the table and say, Misko's going to run the 100 meters under 11 seconds. Everyone in our team's kind of going, I don't think so. Or how the hell are we going to get there? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You know, I don't understand this. You know, and I think, you know, if you think about that in a company sense, it's like, well, with this tiny company, there's these big companies that are making billions of dollars. How are we going to compete with them? So I think the way that the analogy I use to extend that idea of you running the 100 meters under 11 seconds is that what we would do is say, right, okay, we know what we're trying to do. It's this incredible lofty goal. Let's think about how we're going to get you there. So let's think about what the training regime looks like. Let's think about what the nutrition looks like. Let's think about the strategy. How are we going to get you supple enough? How are we going to get you fit enough? How are we going to, and we'll start with these much more granular goals. So our first 6 months might be just making sure that we can prevent any injuries. It might be just getting you to a place where we think that we're confident you're not going to injure. The next 6 months might be trying to get you to run it under 14 seconds. The next 6 months might be trying to get you under 30 seconds and doing all kinds of other training techniques. I don't know much about sprinting, but do you know what I mean?
It's called muscle cycles and stuff.
Exactly.
Smart.
You're breaking this down into its constituent parts. And I think, understanding what those individual goals are on the journey to that ultimate vision is the only reason and the only way a vision and mission can make sense. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just this crazy objective goal that you might say to somebody down in the pub. It needs to be rooted in concrete actions and methodologies and metrics that you can test your performance along the way as you aim for that.
It's I mean 100. So you're basically saying that mission and vision super important as a starting point, but without strategy and roadmaps, you're still dead.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So then you're still a random organization where everybody understands how to execute against mission and vision in different ways.
Absolutely. I think anyone can say we want to build great games that millions of people love to play every day for years. Yeah. Anyone can say that. Yeah. Very few people can actually, organizations can actually do that. And the devil is in the detail of how you do that. And so I think you absolutely have to have those DNA style statements, those constitutional statements about why you exist. But without the detailed strategy, they're for nothing.
I think that's a very important point for people to understand, because we tend to overstate the value of vision, the values of missions, and understate the value of the work that just goes into making the strategy. Making a strategy is not like, let's have an offside and come out with like 10 rules.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of alignment. It's just kind of boring at some point. You have to listen to everybody, then you make the decisions, and then you give ownership of the next stage and so forth. It's a process.
It is.
And
it's grinding.
Yeah, it's
you grind this stuff out. And I think that's a really important point for us to land here, is that these successes, you talked about, Playdemic not being an overnight success. Of course it wasn't. And I've seen very, very few overnight successes in our industry. Yeah. Most overnight successes take 20 years to deliver. And it's those iterative learnings, those understandings of the mission and the vision, and then the grindy steps of strategy to get there. And without that understanding, you have to be able to trace a direct thread from the mission and vision all the way back to what I'm doing tomorrow. And I think the best strategies are able to do that. If I can understand what I'm doing tomorrow and how that's in service of ultimately the goal of this organization, then the organization is operating effectively in line with this strategy.
That's beautiful. Okay, 3 things. More?
So, I think my 3 things there were the big macros with the people, the culture, and then the mission and vision, and then in that the granular strategy.
Of course.
So I think the other thing, getting into real micro stuff, I think the one thing that is so clearly evident to me now is that if you're trying to make mass market, highly successful free-to-play mobile games, your understanding of how competitively compulsive that product needs to be can't be understated. You have to genuinely believe and have objective tests that the thing that you're creating is going to compel people to want to complete that core loop thousands and thousands of times for years. And going back to what we said before about psychological safety, and being able to detach yourself from the subjectivity of an idea you've created is so important. And again, this is something that's talked about a lot in our industry. Supercell put this kind of up front and center in terms of the test and kill philosophy. A lot of companies talk it. A lot of companies will say this is what they do. I find it very interesting that very few truly do. And there are some big impediments to it. The normal capitalist structure of an organization means it's quite a difficult thing to do. If you're in a large organization, you and I want to make a product, we'll maybe make a prototype that will win us some funding, we'll then have to commit to a P&L forecast, we'll have to commit that this is something that's going to come out at a point in time, and then suddenly that thing's got some inertia, and that momentum is very hard to stop. Once that thing's attracted capital deployment, once it's got a forecast, once it's in someone's numbers, somewhere.
Oh, inside a corporation.
It's so difficult, it has to ship, And that corporation may be stating publicly that they believe in this funnel analysis, this test and kill philosophy, but they don't, because they can't. So I think, living that philosophy is crucially important. And that is about being truly impassive in your understanding of whether your product or not can entertain, and be compelling to individuals. And for us, the way we think about it in Fourth Star is we have this thing we call the conveyor belt of doom. And it sounds very negative, but every single idea is strapped to the conveyor belt of doom. So it's destined to be chopped up by the jaws that are at the end of this conveyor belt. The only way you can drag an idea off the conveyor belt of doom is to objectively demonstrate that there's something seriously compelling about that concept. Because without the ability to do that, without the ability to prove that objectively, it's going to be consigned to the bin.
Okay, so there's an interesting topic here. So you have your strategy, you have your vision, you have your mission. Let's say you have your product strategy. Is your approach more like, let's get the MVPs out as soon as possible, test them, show the traction? If you don't show the traction, then the conveyor belt of doom is going to eat it.
Correct.
So my question around this is, I've read the Lean Startup, and I think it's not a good book. I think it's a dangerous book.
Yeah.
I think it prioritizes failing fast over long-term success and
things.
And over strategic thinking, over being deliberate. And I'm trying to understand, like, how are you bringing the elements of being deliberate? Because it's very easy to make a lot of prototypes and kill them all. We've seen companies like Gouge is a good example. At one point, they went to this approach and they became very good at killing games.
Sure.
And very bad at shipping games. And in the end, like, we want to be on that shipping part.
It's a really good point, and there's a real nuance in that. And I'll tell you how we respond to that. So there's a couple of things that we do as well, which again I should talk about for more context. So we have a concepting methodology, and we call it AIM. And A stands for audience, I stands for ingredients, and M stands for mix. And the idea behind AIM is to provide some kind of concept framework. So I think we all know that the great creative ideas happen inside a framework, happen with constraint. So the idea of AIM is to create some constraint. So, we don't just get up in the morning and say, let's just make a game for somebody. The idea of AIM, the idea of AIM is to identify a core audience, and we have to believe that core audience is relatively underserved. Not that there's any audience that's underserved in this market, because there's so much competition, but we have to believe, relatively speaking, there is some audience opportunity there. So with Golf Clash, we felt this being proven to us by things like 8-Ball Pool and other products, that there was a competitive, casual male gamer who wanted to play skill-based PvP games that were relatively underserved. The fact that 8-Ball Pool had made it into the top 20 grossing showed us something. So that was sort of the A with that product. I is about ingredients. So for us, I talked before about the idea that there's lots of iterative steps in product development where people are copying things in the market, people are being inspired by things in the market, some are just plain Xeroxing things in the market. But for us, the right thing to do is to look at successful products and identify ingredients, elements of those games that are doing really, really well, but can be taken objectively out of that particular game loop and maybe used somewhere else. So we identify which ingredients we think resonate well with that audience, and that becomes part of our menu of things we want to look at.
And makes you look at the market much more.
Yeah, exactly. And then M is M's there to make AIM, but M's really prototyping. M's mix. So the idea is we're mixing these ingredients together into new forms. So I think it's important just to sort of give that context. That's our framework.
And how do you test an MVP? Sorry, did I jump?
No, it's fine. I just wanted to kind of come back on your point there around, because I also agree with that nuanced point. That what I just described in the conveyor belt of doom may sound like move quickly and break things. So, and that whole fail fast mentality. So there's a real nuance there for us, and we've got an expression that we use at the office. We love graphs, so we've got a graph for this, and we think there is a threshold by which you have to get to assess the quality of your prototype. So what I mean by that is any idea that you're developing has to have a level of sophistication and polish and joy. It has to feel close to a prototype quality, something you would put in front of a focus tester and be proud of for you to get an objective feedback. So if you produce something just quickly that everyone in the studio recognizes this is not really how we want it to be. We don't. When in the real game it won't look like this. In the real game it won't feel like this. In the real game that'll be quicker. In the real game you won't get that lag. In the real game you won't get that effect on when you move between screens. That then, in our view, makes the whole prototyping phase pointless, because what you're doing is putting something in front of somebody which is so far removed from the thing you're trying to get feedback on.
Exactly.
And we know from experience as you do is that that feedback is so marginal. You know, the difference between success and failure in this market is so marginal that you have to get that thing absolutely right.
Yeah.
So for example, with Golf Clash, that pullback and release mechanic, that went through so many iterations, there's so much work on that to create that joyfulness. To the naked eye, to the untrained eye, that might just seem like a pretty simple thing to do. But I think to the game maker eye, you know that those joyful, those toy-like things, those things that are just pleasant to do, they take a lot of effort and work and iteration. So I think, you know, when we talk about the conveyor belt of doom, the things that are on there aren't just thrown on there. They're made with joy and love, and they're made at a high quality because we believe they have to be at that quality to get objective feedback.
I think those are amazing points, and that's why I kind of challenge. I'm not challenging. I'm asking more questions because people hear these things over and over again, and then they hear that one sentence from you or Ilka or somebody else, and then go replicate and fail, and they miss the nuance. And like, I'm asking more questions because you've done these things and you've been highly successful at doing these things. So the devil's in the detail. Here it is. Like, you are focused on one clear audience, so that's already setting you there. You have clear ingredients that you look at, meaning you play other games, so you try to put things together like any good mobile games, and mix it up, really bringing in not MVPs, but something that is testable, like deliberate development. Even though there's a lot of testing, there's innovation, there's room to figure things out, but in the end, it's a very deliberate process.
Absolutely, and I think that goes back to that idea we said earlier about trying to trace your strategy all the way through. We spend a lot of time reminding everyone, as a team, why we're trying to do this. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, you'll know this, and I know you're about to do a Newzoo podcast. There's about 150 mobile game apps that are doing more than 100 million revenue a year, according to Data AI. We have to be in that 150. Yeah. So that 150 isn't new 150 every year, as we know. Many of that 150 has been in there for a very long time. So we're trying to break into that league. We're trying to be, thankfully we've done it before, so we know it's achievable. Yeah. But we're trying to be in that top league of high performing products. And we know to do that, we have to produce something that is so joyful and compelling to those people that they'll want to stop doing the thing they're currently doing and do something new.
Like TikTok.
Yeah, which is actually eating the world. Yes.
Shout out to TikTok.
Yes, indeed, we love TikTok.
So what are the other sort of micro? I don't even think this is micro. This is like very deliberate product strategy element that you have. It's not like, we like to drink this.
We have our own energy drink.
Our micro is like, we have great all hands.
We live on Prime. Prime. I think, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. We're a great checklist company as well. We like checklists. We like that as a method of keeping us true to that mission. We like to break. We talked a lot about how you take these big ideas and make them granular and make them, you pull them into their sort of atomic parts. We find that actually creating checklists or success criteria, as we call them, is a really important part of that process. To try and make sense, going back to you running 100 meters under 11 seconds, when that turns into very small things that can be measured and done on a daily or weekly basis, that's a really important part of the process for us. So that methodology, which is very deliberate and very unsexy, trying to take a control method from something that for this one of a lazy expression is 80% joyful to 92% joyful is a somewhat dull, grindy process, and something that is very tempting to move away from and move on to the next thing. And I think what we've always tried to do and hopefully got better at and will be best at in this company is to stick with that and say no, we're not moving on from here until we feel that we've got this as far as we can take it, and then we'll move on.
A lot of this that I'm hearing is sort of a very, how would I say, like professional but transparent approach to things.
Yes.
And I think that is what brings the psychological safety, because there are rules.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that transparency, is something that I've been a big fan of for a long time. So we are radically transparent. So we have been ever since we started Playdemic. Playdemic, everyone in Playdemic knew the full P&L. Wow. So I would do a town hall every week. We had weekly town halls. We actually had 2 town halls a week in Playdemic. We had one on a Monday and one on a Friday, and because we believed in over communication. And that transparency flowed through to the P&L. So there wasn't a person inside Playdemic who didn't know the P&L. Now, not everyone might have actually taken a lot of notice, but those who did, had access to it and could see it. And for me, that's a really important part of this process. In my experience, companies don't share their financials with their employees for two reasons. One, they're making too much money, they don't want to share it.
Yeah.
Or two, they're not making enough and they're going to go out of business.
Correct.
So I think sharing the reality of where we are with your highly talented, highly committed, highly aligned team makes absolute sense. Why would you hide part of the map from these people? So for us, transparency permeates every part of what we do, and it allows us to face up to the challenge. The challenge which is so immense. What we're trying to do is really difficult. So we don't want to do anything that makes it harder for ourselves. I mean, really open and honest about the scale of that challenge and transparent in how we're achieving against it is really important.
That's so. I've often seen this transparency thing brought up. And I understand perfectly your point. It makes all the sense. And then I go back to my examples of other founders that were were transparent equally, and in a situation where the company's key game would fail, and they were showing decline, and they were kind of seeing that the money is not going to be here forever. We put a lot of money into this, and it's not what it was supposed to be. The company saw a good amount of attrition, and the problem with that attrition is that the company was also going through some negotiation with key partners, and as you well know, you can't be having attrition during those negotiations, because they are buying the people, and so the problem also with those negotiations is that they're private. They cannot tell the team. So even though they are transparent, they actually are not, because they are not telling an important part of this equation. So how do you kind of tackle that challenge?
I think that's really important. So I guess there's a couple of things in there. I guess the first point, before we get on to sort of the acquisition and NDA governed negotiations, there's another part there which you talk about. What happens when the financials are going the wrong way? When the business is going south, does that lead to attrition? And inevitably in some cases it does. There's no hiding the fact that people enjoy being part of successful organizations. And if that organization is ceasing to be successful, then obviously attrition might be a natural consequence of that. And I think none of us will pretend that's not true. The one thing I would say though is if you're radically transparent about your performance, you'll see that early, and you'll be able to raise that challenge early. So if you see that a product has peaked and it's coming down the other side, there is an opportunity as an organization to spot that early in its metrics, whether it be financial or whether it be about engagement or retention or play session length or whatever it is. You can address that early and say, look, this is happening. This is happening to us. As a team, we're trying to win, and right now it doesn't look like we're winning as much as we used to. What are we going to do about it? And you can respond together as an organization through that transparency. I think maybe some of the examples you're talking about is that when that information isn't flowing quite as readily, there might be transparency, but maybe things aren't being pointed out and identified early, then that information can come as a bit of a shock. You go to the quarterly town hall and you think things are going really well, and actually the CEO says, well, they're not. They're really not. We are 25% down where we were at this point last year. Oh, that must mean we're in trouble. Yeah. I think sugarcoating that information as well can also lead to negative outcomes.
Yes.
This guy's telling me it's okay. It can't be okay. We're 25% down. That can't be a good thing.
A different story then.
Yeah, he's trying to convince me to stay. He doesn't want me to think this is bad news. So I think you can't do this piecemeal approach to transparency. You have to just be open. And if your numbers are down, they're down. Let's talk about it. The only organization that's going to solve these numbers is us. How are we going to respond to that? So I think that's one thing I would say. I've definitely seen situations where we've been through adversity, and actually transparency and over communication has held more people in than have left. And I think that's a really important point, is that actually if someone respects you enough to be open and honest about the challenge, then I think you have the ability to see it in the round. I think there are lots of situations where keeping people out of that information or giving them a partial piece of that information is more likely to result in them leaving. Not every situation, but I think that's, as a principle,
I think that's a very good point.
I think in terms of your second point of your question, which is what do you do when you're in a commercial negotiation that's sensitive and maybe governed by NDA? Certainly the way that I've handled that is I've tried to seek, I guess we're fortunate that our organisation has been relatively small in terms of headcount. If you're employing thousands and thousands of people, this becomes a lot more challenging, or if you're a public company, this is a lot more challenging. But as a smaller private company, I've strived as much as possible, working in partnership with companies that may be talking to us about acquisition, to share as much as possible with the group. Mm-hmm. So in a town hall meeting, if we're entering into an acquisition process, everyone will know that.
Yeah.
There won't be anyone in the studio who doesn't know we're having those kind of conversations. Yeah. They may not know the details that are commercially sensitive, of course, but they'll know it's happening. And my updates might well be, look, it's going really well. We're talking to 5 or 10 companies. There's some of the companies you might expect us to be talking to. It's going, or it's not going well, or we think we're not going to do this now, or there'll be those kind of updates so that people feel like they're engaged in that process and they're part of that process.
That's fascinating. I would lean towards the full transparency. I think I've done in between, kind of like thinking, like that was always my question, is like what is the downside and what is the upside? And I've always pushed more towards clarity over transparency, because everything can't be transparent, but I'll try to make everything as clear as possible.
Sure. I think those are really, really important points, because they're good bedfellows as well. Transparency can lead to cognitive overload.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's definitely something that I've been guilty of, is you start sharing everything, and there are certain people in the organisation who say, I didn't want to know that. It's not my job to worry about that. I'm now going to bed worrying about something that I wasn't worrying about before. Yeah. So I think you have to be careful as to how you deliver the information, and you have to deliver it in a manner that says, these are the things we should be worrying about, these are things that we aren't worrying about, these are things that we've got, don't worry about them. And I think that is a really important part of the process, and that clarity of communication is essential. I'll tell you one little anecdote that really brought transparency home to me was, our rock pool business, which was, I said before, was a work for hire business. We did a lot of work for Sega, a lot of work for THQ, we were making these games, and I'd often sort of go out and have dinner with people once we'd done a deal, and they'd sort of go, oh, you're making loads of money, aren't you? And I started to realise, actually, they thought we were making more money than we were. So we moved our pricing model. So the way our pricing model worked internally, and you sort of got measure of the kind of guy I am, so it won't surprise you, is that it was very detailed. We had this model.
Checklists.
And everything. Every single hour was, we knew how much every single hour cost us, and we knew what the overhead contribution would be, what our profit contribution would be, and we'd sort of calculate all the numbers, and we'd work out and we'd have a contingency for overruns, and it was never right, of course, but we'd sort of, at least we had a very sort of mathematical approach. And so I suddenly realised, actually, this is what we should be sharing with our partners. So we went to a completely open book pricing model. So when we pitched on a game, we would turn up and we'd say, this is how much it's going to cost us. This is exactly how many people, exactly how much they're going to cost, exactly what the overhead contribution is, and exactly what the profit is that we're going to make. And what was hilarious was that actually the profit was way less than they thought it was. So, and that was such an important thing for us, because then suddenly it aligned us much more effectively with our partners, with the commissioning publisher. They knew we had to make a profit. If we didn't make a profit, we wouldn't get through lean periods. If we didn't make a profit, we wouldn't be able to grow. They knew we had to make a profit. And as soon as we were open and transparent about that, it added a new dimension to that relationship, a new level of trust that wasn't there before.
Wow. Transparency goes all the ways.
I think so. I mean, there's no.
But what do you mean? You think you've successfully done it? I think you make a great case.
I'm nervous of saying there's any singular solution to every single problem.
Devil's in the detail. You can't do cognitive overload, and you have to, focus on things that are important for the team to understand, so that everybody's on the same page. And I would assume in this type of a organization, the people have to be quite senior, right?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's one of the things that attracts me to these kind of businesses. Is that you're working with a relatively small number of people, so communication can be very, very effective, because I know there's I can't remember the name of the very famous psychologist who talks about when communication breaks down at a certain number of people.
150.
Something like that, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like a Dutch name, maybe.
Something like that, isn't it? Yeah. We'll look that one up. But I think that's definitely true. I think communication breaks down exponentially over a certain number. So these games businesses that we've set up tend to not get over about 100 people.
Yes.
So communication is still very easy. So a lot of things I'm talking about are only possible inside these organizations. You haven't got very many levels of management, so they're quite flat structures. As you say, they're senior, experienced people who understand what they're trying to do. So that makes this kind of a culture much easier to implement because of the nature of the people that you're working with.
Fascinating. What else are we missing? Or do we
Wow.
go to the
I'm not going to share all the secret sauce. But I think that's probably a good summary of kind of how we approach it.
More than good.
And I think that's I suppose the only thing we haven't really touched on. And I know when you were prepping me for this, you were talking about how competitive the market is, why now?
Yeah. Well, I want to ask something that you've kind of gotten rid of the tendencies or some of the elements over these 4 companies now. Like, what were the things that you thought would work, and then you had to drop it?
Yes. Well, I think. Well, I mean, you mentioned Gang Nations earlier, and Gang Nations was a project that really should have died, and that was a really good learning experience for us. That was us absolutely not living the test and kill methodology. We became very emotionally attached to that product, and we persisted with it. We thought we could polish our way into better metrics. All the mistakes that we know about. That was a really important learning experience for us. So I think that lesson from a product perspective was a really good one. Mm-hmm. I think we probably touched a little bit on the hiring. Hiring, again, I'm conscious that some of these expressions sound a little bit jargonistic, but hiring, if you believe that people are your greatest asset, then hiring is your most important function. So trying to really invest in hiring and seeing hiring as a crucial function for success is really important. And again, that's something that people will say, but actually doing it is quite difficult, because if you're in service of making product, if you're in service of the strategy, hiring can often feel like an annoyance. It can often feel like this thing that you sort of have to do because you're resource constrained. You need to get some people through the door. So really focusing down on the hiring process. So we did a thing at Playdemic, which we still do now at Fourth Star, which is that we have a very involved hiring process. So it's a multi-stage process. Mm-hmm. The final stage of that process is we ask everybody who's going to come to work for us when they're a candidate to come and work for us for 3 days.
Nice.
So they come work for us for free, and they come work inside the team they're going to work.
3 days work for free.
3 days work for free. Now, I actually discovered why for free?
Yeah.
Because I think it really represents a really important commitment from that individual. Mm-hmm. If you're asking somebody to commit to something, I think they have to risk something. So if somebody comes and they say, I'm prepared to give you 2 or 3 days of my holiday, or they might call them sick, I don't know. But
oh wow,
they're going to give you 2 to 3 days of their holiday, their vacation time.
Yeah.
They're really committing to this process. And what we say to people in this hiring funnel is, look, this is as much for you as it is for us, because you may be an incredibly exceptional individual, you may be super talented, you have all the experience, but going back to what we said earlier, if you don't have the chemistry with the team you're about to go into, this thing is not going to work. So you need to come and be in that team. And I think the reason we say 2 or 3 days is because a lot of people, when they come to an organization for the first time, it's very difficult to let your guard down and be the real you. Mm-hmm. I think 2 or 3 days in, you're kind of getting to the real you.
Interesting.
So you can be an authentic version of yourself. You can see the authentic version of the people around you, and both the organization and the individual can make a decision as to whether that is a good fit.
It's a mutual evaluation. I like that a lot. It just brought me back to my discussion on the podcast. We had Jordan Mazer, who worked at Scopely, Riot, and now at A16Z as their head of talent. And I was like adamant on testing everybody. Test everybody. Yeah. It doesn't matter. If somebody doesn't want to test, then they don't want the job.
Agreed.
And the test is about 4 to 8 hours. And he was very much like, no, because you lose that candidate and they will get another job. And that might be an American approach. I don't know. This is UK, so that might be different.
Well, I understand. And again, I think there's a nuanced point in there.
Yeah.
I think there are 2 ways of doing that. So I think some of those barriers, some of those tests feel like barriers. They feel like an obstacle. And I think part of getting this right is, it's a bit like we were talking about before about creating psychological safety. You can have a supportive and warm culture that's high performance. Yeah. And I think this is similar to the hiring process. As you take somebody to that point where they're ready to do a coding test or an art test or whatever it is, if it's with one of our businesses, you've already had several meetings. You're already both pretty invested in that process, and hopefully both parties recognise the value of that test.
Yes.
The candidate doesn't want to go into an environment where their skills may be misunderstood. The organisation doesn't want to hire a candidate without truly understanding their skills, because we talk about this a lot. Interviews are actually a really poor measure of game development ability. So you might be really good at interviews, but you might suck at coding. So we need to get you into that point where both parties understand. And then beyond that, we then need to do the chemistry test, the cultural fit test, which is that coming in and spending time with the organisation. So I think there are, you're both right.
Yeah.
they can be really off-putting if they're delivered in the wrong way, too early in the process.
Exactly. If they're like gates. In our case, it was more like the person joins our Slack channel, so they're interacting with the manager and so forth. So it's not on site.
Yes.
But it is like you're working from home.
Yeah.
And so at least you're getting, if it's art director, you're getting art feedback and you're modifying and you're having communication and so forth. So.
Sure. And the style and manner of that communication is also important, isn't it? If that is very kind of, if the power balance is off, if it's kind of, talking down to the individual, then I think you can, alienate people pretty quickly that way.
All right. Emotionally attached to projects, check. Hiring is the most important function, check. What else?
Well,
what else?
Well, I think we've covered a lot. We've covered.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
The macro, we covered some of the micro, sort of the aim process.
All the things that are working is because something didn't work and you perfected them. So let's move on to the last thing about how you work, and this is very interesting. 4 days work week. I read this from somewhere, and let me preface this with a story. So, I was at a Unity event in Israel, and a couple of years ago, we're sitting in the bus, and the bus is full of executives. It's like this event called AppFest, really fun one.
Yeah.
And everybody's from everywhere, and it's going, and then I'm listening to this conversation. Remember, an Indian executive and an American one. And the Indian looks at this sounds like a joke. The Indian talks to the American like, have you heard what they're doing in Europe? He's like, no, what's up? I was like, 4-day work week. And then he laughed and he said, we're going to work 6 days a week. And then they were just laughing how lazy Europeans are. Fourth Star is doing 4-day work week. And without any prejudice, I'm just always remembering this conversation. I'm remembering the Pocket Gamer. It was a games industry biz article where one studio, I think in Romania, tried the 4-day work week, and they came up with the revelation that it's 20% slower.
Yeah.
On the dot. Why are you doing 4 days work week?
It's a really good question, and I do recognise both those critiques.
You're trying 4 days.
We're trying. We're experimenting. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we do, we didn't touch on this earlier, but one of the things we do is, when we think about how we behave in 4 Star, we actually have some very clear behaviours. Again, that sort of DNA of the organisation, that's written down, and we all understand it, we all know what we're signing up for. One of the things that we've always been very focused on, in all our companies actually, but very much in Playdemic and now very much in 4 Star, is that we measure productivity by output, not input. So it's very easy to waste a lot of time in organizations. I can sit in front of my PC from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, 5 days a week, and do very little.
Yes.
And so we know scientifically measuring the time that I'm in front of the PC is not a great measure of output. It's not a great measure of productivity, and it's certainly not a great measure of creativity or innovation. So what we're most interested in is what people are actually outputting, what their productivity is, how innovative they are, how creative they are. So what we're certainly interested in doing is experimenting in the best way to create that. Go back to what we said before about creating the best environment for people to do incredible things. So I should say at the outset, the way that we have communicated this experiment inside of 4 Star is that we believe that we will be more productive. And productive here is a nuanced word. It doesn't just mean quantity of output, it also means the quality of output. So we believe we'll be more qualitatively productive in 4 days than we will in 5. That's the thesis that we're trying to examine. The logic behind that is that we know that being highly creative and innovative at this edge of high performance requires high degrees of focus, it requires high degrees of energy, it requires high degrees of collaboration, and that's pretty exhausting. So what we're thinking is that actually if you do that aggressively for 4 days and then have 3 days out, that might be a better way of doing it than doing 5 days and 2 days out. Now there seems to be some evidence to suggest that it might be, some evidence to suggest that it might not be. We have our metric of failure, and it's interesting you made this point, and I stood up in a town hall meeting just the beginning of last week, and I said our metric of failure here is 80% output. If we're doing 80% productivity, then this whole experiment is a complete failure, because doing what we're trying to do here is so difficult, it's so competitive, that if we're removing 20%, to your anecdote from the bus, if we're removing 20% of our ability, then we're definitely going to fail. So this is an experiment in saying, we don't really care about the days or the hours. What we care about is what we're actually creating. Now, I think, as you've heard from me already, we're very focused and clear about what it is we're trying to do. Can we do it better in 4 days with a high degree of focus, a high degree of energy, high degree of collaboration than we can in 5? I don't know the answer yet. I really don't. And I think, you know, we're all going into it in that spirit of transparency to say we've got to be on our guard to make sure this isn't 80%. Because if it is, we're going to fail.
I think that's very, very interesting way you're putting it, because it's not a trick to get people hired, especially since you have to try for 3 days.
Yes,
for free.
yes, yeah.
So it's not like you're lowering the bar. It's like just work 4 days and you can be here. But
Yes.
it is a way to find the optimal output. And just like, I mean, we use too many sports analogies, but sports is true. You can overtrain.
You can overtrain.
And you can be, you know, less productive that way. And we've been in companies where a lot of time goes to meetings and stuff like that. So this probably is when you limit the time, you make people focus on the most important things, and through that they won't waste and think there's, you know, well, I'll do this on Friday.
That's the positive view of it, certainly. And we did a little Q&A in this town hall meeting I did on last Monday, and one of our team said just that. He said, look, actually, I'll be honest with you, Paul, when I come to the office, you know, historically, because they're all ex-Playdemic people, the first half an hour or so of the day, I'm getting a coffee and having a chat and just logging in and just sort of get my brain warmed up.
Yeah.
He said, I now know I can't do that. So I just hit the ground running. And I thought, okay, that's really interesting, because that's what we're hoping to achieve here. It's too early to say whether it's successful, but I think you're absolutely right. If you can create the notion that you have an extra day in a week to do all the things that get in the way of work in a 5-day week, please use that extra day to do all of those things. Don't do them as well as the 4 days.
Yes.
You know, stay very laser focused. This new constraint, you know, let's use it to do something incredible. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, no deliveries, no bullshit like that.
If you've got appointments, see a doctor or a dentist, do it on a
They
Friday.
are on the 5th day.
Yeah, I should say we're very prescriptive. So Friday is the day that people don't work. So we don't allow people to choose their 4 days. It's Monday to Thursday.
Because it's teamwork, and that leads me to the question of remote work. How are you about that?
Yeah, well, there's one point I guess I'll make that reflects on both these points, is that I think this approach, if you are a supporter of this 4-day week thesis, then it works in particular scenarios. So, for example, right now, what Full Star's trying to do is loads of creative, innovative, collaborative, iterative work that involves people coming together, trying to get to this quality bar, to test it, to see if we can get it off the conveyor belt of doom. Once you're in a successful, globally launched service-based product, then clearly people not working on a Friday suddenly becomes a really bad idea. You know, our players don't not to play on a Friday, and we really don't want to encourage them not to. So, you know, this model is suited to certain types of work, and I would, you know, and that's why it's something that's like all of our processes and methodologies at Full Start. It's under constant review. You know, anyone is open to challenge it, as we all do at all times. But when it comes to hybrid work, it's a similar approach. I'm a great believer that when you're doing highly creative, innovative work with a team, being physically located is really important. I've not seen any evidence to convince me that being remotely located in that type of work is better. It may be just as good, some people would argue, but my experience is it's worse.
Yes.
That actually it has a negative impact on creativity, on collaboration, on speed, on communication. So my view is a strong one. I know Alex shares this as well, that being co-located in a physical space together is the best way to get that to work. However, we also acknowledge that some work is better done in private. There are pieces of work where you just have to get your head down, you know what you're doing, you need some quiet, you need to do that. We've tried to create offices that allow that to happen. Right now in Full Star, we don't have an office that allows you to do that. We're in one big room. And actually that work where you've done the collaboration, you've done the brainstorming, you've got a mission, you know, Miska knows exactly what he's doing for the next 4 hours. That often is better done somewhere quiet, somewhere you've got, and I think that's the benefit I think we get from hybrid. The pandemic, you know, it's funny, when we went into the pandemic, I was in charge of Playdemic, but also of TT Games as well, which was the much larger studio that makes all the Lego games and Warner. And we were thinking about how we would work remotely, and we had meetings. You know, we had at that point, I guess it was like maybe 600 people across both those organisations. And we had lots of meetings where we would honestly say to each other, this just can't work. We just can't do this. You know, we've never done this can't work. And we actually used Playdemic as a test case. We said, look, let's try and send Playdemic home for a week. Just 1 week, you know, to see if the company just falls off a cliff. And obviously, thankfully it didn't. But what was interesting is that week happened to coincide with the start of the lockdowns in the UK. So Playdemic went home for a week and didn't come back for 2.5 years. Which was hilarious, and obviously the TT went home as well. But I think what we learned through that journey was that actually, whilst it's far from ideal for many of the things that we want to do in video games, there are certain things that it does work for, or rather there are certain things you can continue to do from home. And they tend to be those singular tasks where you know exactly what you're doing, you need focus, you don't want a cognitive overload of people chatting around you.
Asynchronous work.
Correct. So I think, you know, that's one approach to hybrid work. I think, you know, and this is being completely honest with you, I think it's hard for us to hire now without suggesting that we will work to some extent in a hybrid way. We've not yet got to the point where we're mandating you have to be in the office all the time. We might get there, but we're not there today.
I think Bandai, if I'm correct, Bandai Namco in Barcelona, they have a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
They've been on a podcast, they're talking about it. And I believe it's 4-day at the office.
Okay, that's
and
interesting.
then 5th day, go motorcycle, drink sangria.
Yeah.
They are in the same phase.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, because I suspect we might net out there as well, because I think that those two things feel like good bedfellows.
Yeah.
If you're going for that strong, focused, collaborative work, it tends to be done better in one space. If you try and do that in 4 days rather than 5, it ups the need to be in a single space.
Yeah, and the second part where you can be at home, that you should be at home and concentrating. If that's the first thing you take a day to do a concept or something, it's like wake up, get your kids out and just do it. Like, don't even spend time commuting.
100%, and I think you can waste a lot of time commuting.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do, we're actually just in the process of fitting out a new studio space. And one of the things we're trying to do in that new studio space is actually create a different space for that piece of work. So we've actually called an area the library, and the library area of the studio is designed for that type of work, that really quiet, focused work.
You can't even take your phone in.
You can't even take your phone in.
Not really?
Yeah.
You've got to go in there. That's so smart.
Because I think, you know, the best case scenario is where you could work in different ways in the same physical space.
I always wanted to have meetings where you have to leave the phone out.
Yeah, do you know, I'm a big fan of that. I think that, you know, phones, obviously, we love them,
of course.
But the impact of just holding a phone. You know, if I was holding my phone now talking to you, it would show I'm not connected. I'm not as interested.
Analog.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah.
You're perfectly fine when I'm.
People listening to this don't know that you're writing and looking at the phone.
I'm just drawing.
You're drawing doodles as I call you.
Super bad. No, but that's true. And even though I have all the questions on the phone, I have to actually rewrite them here. But it creates a better conversation. I think it's the same thing with meetings. And I'm addicted to my phone.
Yes, you and me both. And
so,
you have to.
So it's not like I'm better. It's like no. This is like if it's in my pocket, I can't do it.
But we connect so much better because neither of us have a phone here.
Exactly.
And I think that is a really important thing.
So Paul, why are you going to succeed?
Well, I think we're going to succeed for the fourth time. I think we're going to succeed because I think
four and a half.
Yeah, we've done a few other things.
Playdemic is like a double.
True, it is, and we've done a few other investments along the way. But I think, you know, the way I like to think about it is that I love making games. I love making free-to-play mobile games. I know Alex does too. One of the reasons that we do is that as a game maker, I think you're really excited about getting your product into as many hands as possible. And mobile to me still represents that opportunity. And one of the things I love about Golf Clash is that I meet people all the time that have played it. Yeah. I used to talk a lot. You know, we're very metrics obsessed at Playdemic, and we are at Full Star. In fact, we haven't talked about AI. We've got a really incredible head of AI at Full Star. And we were using a lot of AI actually at Playdemic.
Something for the
next podcast. But one of the things I used to love, and anyone who's talked to who used to work at Playdemic will tell you, I used to bore people with the amount of hours of entertainment that we created. And I love this idea that we created thousands and thousands of years of entertainment with people, because that makes me feel good. I think it makes other people feel good. Mobile represents an incredible opportunity to do that. You know, thanks to Apple and Google and the user acquisition infrastructure, which is not what it used to be, we have this ability to make a product, you know, in Manchester in the UK and sell it on a global scale and then send people on a global scale and distribute it globally. Very few industries have that.
Yeah.
And when you look at the scale of that opportunity, there's like 1.67 billion people played a bell game last year. There's 107 billion just in payments going through the app stores. A lot more now going around the app stores, and incredible amount of advertising that's going on mobile. Very few industries have those metrics. So I think there's something incredibly exciting about being able to do that. We've said how hard it is and that the proceeds of that success are very unevenly delivered. I think by my calculation, the top 20 is about 17% of the whole market. The top 150 might be as much as 60% of the whole market. It's an incredibly concentrated distribution of success. However, we know we've done it before. I think we have a set of experiences and skills and motivations and approaches that narrow the odds for us. It doesn't guarantee success. We all know in this industry, if I sat here and told you I'm definitely going to be a success, then I think I'd be winning a golden twig next year. But I think certainly, I think we are reducing our odds of being successful. I think we've got a better set of odds than a lot of other companies, and I'd like to think that our commitment to product quality, our commitment to engagement and retention, and the meta structures that allow long-term player monetization will mean that we will not bring something to market that isn't going to be successful. So if we fail, it will be that we never brought games to market. We will not bring something to market that we aren't convinced objectively is going to be successful. Now, you never know 100%, but I think our filters and our experience are good enough that whatever it is we bring to market has a reasonable chance of being successful.
I have one last question.
Yes.
So, were you ever afraid of failing?
Every single day.
You're still afraid of failing?
Petrified.
Really?
Yeah, I remember reading.
You don't come like you don't.
Oh, underneath this calm
you're,
demeanor is a petrified
child. Just very English, calculated and smart.
But you know what? I think that's. I remember reading a business book once, and it was a guy, I can't remember his name now. He was a publisher, Felix Dennis. He was called. He was a publisher of lots of magazines and different publications in the UK. Very successful guy, and he said, "Show me an entrepreneur without demons, and I'll show you an unsuccessful entrepreneur." And I think that always resonated with me. I think many people who try to do difficult things are largely driven from a fear of failure. And I think that's always been true of me. The thought of failing makes me work harder, makes me try harder, hopefully makes me more innovative, hopefully makes me think the best way that I can. So yeah, 100% petrified of failure.
Do you have like a chip on your shoulder? Like why?
Oh, probably, yeah. I'm sure I have.
Like, who are you proving?
Well, do you know the funny thing is,
proving wrong?
Off the record, you and many other people have said to me, "Why are you doing this?"
Yes. It's a legitimate question.
Yeah, you're now in your late 40s. You've got plenty of money. You've got a family.
You're in your late 40s.
I am. I'm 47.
Wow.
So,
I would have said you're 37.
Oh, you're an old charmer.
No, I'm serious. like people don't understand through camera. I'm listening close.
That's very
There's
kind
no
of
wrinkles.
You. That's very kind of you. I spent all my money on Botox.
Yeah.
So,
there's no gray hair.
There is actually.
I have more.
Oh, if you look carefully, you'll find gray. But yeah, and I think that's that fear of failure that drives people.
Yeah.
There's no logical reason. I'm not doing it for commercial accolades or money, or I just feel that real drive to do it. I'm sure part of that is the fear of not doing it.
Yeah, that chip on the shoulder. I'm not going to mention the name of the CEO of one of the most successful gaming companies, and I heard down the grapevine. I was like, the same chat. I was like, so why is he still doing this? Like Paul, you're successful. He's
crazy successful. Yeah,
it will make you look like me compared to you. So, and he's like, no, he's really into it. Like he wants to prove it. He wants to do it. And people close to him like, yeah, he's down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like, definitely doesn't have to do it.
No, and I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, it's that. I mean, a lot of successful entrepreneurs aren't
Yeah.
well-adjusted, sort of, rational people.
Yeah.
They are driven by a certain thing, and I think it's like, I know we talk a lot about sport, but people say, "Oh, I want to be a
Yeah.
footballer because you'll earn loads of money."
Yeah.
No person ever became a successful footballer because they wanted to earn loads of money. They became a successful footballer because they were talented, they were driven, they were
About the
passionate
game.
about the game. That's why they're successful. It happens to be that you earn a lot of money. That's a byproduct, and I think that's true of lots of entrepreneurs. Not
That's
all,
why they
but
keep
lots.
playing until their wheels fall off. Like
Exactly.
they could stop
Yeah.
and have their bodies, but they
Yeah.
still keep playing
Yeah.
until somebody says enough. Like
Yeah.
we're not take you on the team. It's like, well, I'll go to Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. Well, maybe that's the deal you and I should have.
Yeah.
When I'm here with company 6
Yeah.
and I'm kind of hobbling in, you
Yeah.
say, enough now, Paul.
Nobody fund this guy.
Yeah.
Let him ride off to the sunset. I'm gonna fund it myself.
I'm going to pay him to stop.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Paul, for fantastic. Was this an interview? It feels like a chat.
It feels like a chat. It was lovely. And look, I'm so honoured to do
Yeah.
this as well, because as you know, I'm a big fan of you, Deconstructor of Fun. I'm a very loyal twig.
It is.
I think I'm 265. I think I've
Yeah.
still got 266.
It's mind-boggling every time to see real people who listen to the podcast.
We love it.
And especially people as successful as you listen to the nonsense that we spew out every week.
I'm a big fan.
Big fan of the nonsense. So thank you so much. Truly, one of the best interviews. Thank you.
Miska. I've loved that. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for watching. 4th star, link in the description. If you want to work for 3 days for free. No, I'm just kidding. if you want to join, I would say one of the most interesting startups out of Europe, for sure. Work with Paul, learn how to build organizations, get on the conveyor belt of doom, and try your luck with AI. This is the organization for you. So,
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Miska. Appreciate it.
damn, that was good.
Yeah, I love that.
I was surprised. I don't have much expectations.